let's pivot onwards because I'm sure we could talk about him for a long time here, but it feels like he's going to be the more credible one. Moving on a little bit, I wanted to get your thoughts on Sean Longstaff because I've spoken quite a bit of it about it, and I'm not massive on these Premier League proven players of which we have to go out there and we have to sign, and a lot of them are inflated fees. And for me, it's kind of like inflated wages when it comes to like Decore wants 180 grand a week. You look at Suchek, who's wanting a mass amount of money per week, or is on a mass amount of money per week when you kind of look at 100 plus grand at this moment in time and would come with a transfer fee as well. You're looking at Sean Longstaff at 27 years of age, a runner in that midfield, a lot of experience, can't break into that midfield of Tenali, Gamaresh, and Joe Linton because that is a top four class midfield, if we're being honest, and should probably a Champions League midfield. But for me, a runner, interest continues, quality on the ball, and it feels very much like Scott McTominay at Napoli. He just needs a home, he needs a place, he needs someone to refine his position, and maybe that could be Leeds United. What are your thoughts on Longstaff?
Yeah, he's a good footballer. I won't deny that at all. Technical quality is probably not. I wouldn't say it's Premier League quality, technical quality, but he has other qualities as well. I think as well. I do see him as potentially in that box to box role. Um, could complement Ampadu and Tanaka quite well in a midfield three in terms of on the right. In terms of say if Tanaka's like your controller, if you like, your bit
Yeah.
all your build up runs through Tanaka. Ampadu's your holding midfielder, if you like. Sometimes maybe even drop into the into a back three or just protecting the back four. And I think Longstaff has that bit more of a free role, but the legs to cover Tanaka and Ampadu out of possession. So if we're going to a 4-3-3, I think we could do a lot worse than Sean Longstaff. I'll say that much. In terms of in a 4-2-3-1, alongside Tanaka or Ampadu, I'm less convinced about Longstaff
Mm,
because I think obviously it says quality on the ball probably comes a bit more into question when he doesn't have the two of Ampadu and Tanaka taking charge of that. Less license to push up the pitch as well in a midfield too, because it's all well and good saying his roles to play as a box-to-box midfielder, but if we don't have a lot of the ball, whether he likes it or not, and he's playing deeper, he will have less opportunities to get up the pitch. So if it's a 4-3-3, which I actually want us to go to, I'm not. I think obviously the 10 signing is getting spoken about a lot. I'm not a big advocate for spending
I'm
massively on the
I'm
10.
not.
I do
I'm
think we
not.
should buy a 10. I do think we should buy a 10, but
Kind of want two eights, don't you? Which can transition a little
I
bit,
think
maybe.
so. I think you're
Yeah.
seeing with Fulham, Brentford, Brighton. I'm not saying we have to copy everything these teams do, but I don't think there's any coincidence that in this middle of the pitch, they want legs and
Yeah.
technical quality and security. They don't want players who are going to take risks and turn the ball over a lot. Even like, say, a Jorginho Rutter, for example, Brighton, who are well established now in the Premier League, haven't played Jorginho Rutter as a 10. They played him more
Mm.
as a sort of a second striker and surrounded them with players who just keep the ball and says, let Rutter play the free role in that kind of sense. So for me, still like a 10, but I think that I'd rather us go with a bit more of a project signing as a 10 or someone who's better value for money than some of the names that have been linked so far. But Sean Longstaff, we could do a lot worse. I'll say that much. I wouldn't say he's top on my list in terms of ideal midfield profiles. I think there's other names that have kind of buzzed me a bit more, if that's the word for it. But Longstaff, we could do a lot worse. I think naturally there's a bit of name bias as well. I think with someone like a Longstaff, I think
Really? Yeah.
I think there's a little bit as well. I think sometimes a surname does impact the perception of a sign a little bit. For example, I go back to say like Tyler Adams in terms of when we signed Tyler Adams, who, yes, of course, recency bias will be, he was injured in the crucial part of the season, but that first half of the season, Tyler Adams was superb for us, and he was a superb fit for the system. There
Yeah.
was more exciting names in terms of other
Some,
options.
some would say Mr. Tyler Adams could definitely fit in this system as well. Some would say.
Of course, he's still listen. He's playing for Bournemouth, who are in the top
Let's
half
not
of the Premier League.
let's not go down that rabbit hole. But there's that that
He's
yeah.
a good foot. Listen, as much as I'd love to say Tyler Adams isn't a good footballer, he's a good footballer. There's no. If you profile him right, same
Yeah,
with
yeah,
Sean
agreed,
Longstaff,
agreed.
you can
Well,
get something out of him.
it's very much a shutter role, isn't it? When you're looking at a midfielder, and for me, he will be very decent when it comes to legs and athleticism and physicality in that defensive transition. I think his finishing is a little bit erratic, 100%. He's not going to be that creative, innovative number eight, which we sometimes see nowadays. I think that's what I've mentioned it several times on here. The likes of Erdegaard have almost morphed into it's not really a 10 anymore. It's sort of a box to box midfielder who can create and can be innovative as well. I think he'd be useful in certain games where Leeds want to absorb pressure and spring quickly. I think that's where someone like Longstaff would be effective. But like we've said, mate, not ultra athletic, not ultra athletic, not a creator. And it'd be interesting to see if I don't know if it'd work with a two, because I think he'd have to sit on the bench. I'm not sure there'd be that much reasoning behind that. But let's pivot again on to someone else. And I don't know how this is going to work completely, but this is someone who's definitely a level up. I don't think this is going to work as well. It's Habib Diara. I'll let you take the floor for a little bit if you want.
Well, that's one of the names straight away that buzzes me more. No disrespect to Sean Longstaff, but obviously, I'll be honest, he wasn't a player I was very aware of before. To be honest, not really aware of at all. Really, sort of recognise the name and maybe off. I follow a lot of Twitter accounts, sort of rising footballers and accounts like that, and I've seen his name come up a few times. But actually, in terms of seeing him, I can't actually recall seeing him before until the game on Tuesday night. I've watched a few clips since that, and I do like what I see from Diara. I think there's a lot more goal scoring potential than Longstaff. Certainly a lot more technical quality. And I think with Diara as well, I think he could pivot his game to play in the midfield too, as well if needed. And the thing to say is, of course, we can talk about number 10s and creativity, but even with, like, say, a Liverpool, the signing Florian Wirtz, I don't think Florian Wirtz will play at 10 for Liverpool. I think he'll play on the left. And I think it shows, the fact that that's getting spoken about shows that even the best team in the country by a mile don't feel they can take the risk on playing a number 10. Shows that, a team lower down the league, up and coming in the Premier League, certainly can't do the same. So in terms of creative qualities, that concerns me a lot less. But I think what Diara gives you is goal scoring potential and that ability to get up and down the pitch, which I think will be absolutely massive for us. And his recovery pace and speed and physicality, that's the most important thing. Physicality is what you need for Ampadu Tanaka, from a technical point of view, is good enough for the Premier League. I 100% believe that.
Right.
But it needs legs around it for me. I really do believe that.
Yeah. 100% Diara. Yeah, I'm not aware of Diara whatsoever, to be honest. It was a name of which I looked at afterwards, and obviously he's 21 years of age, got a massive upward trajectory, and it looks like when it comes to Strasbourg that they're maybe looking at him being part of a bidding war here when it comes to some of the top clubs. His numbers, Oscar. Gee, I mean, in the game the other day as well. That's the full.
That was that's the only 90 I've seen.
Yeah, same here. But like, there's him, Kamara. I mean, they just looked in that midfield. There was strength, athleticism, good on the ball, great ball carriers, and I thought very, very impressive. Very impressive. Someone I wanted to speak to you about as well in terms of a profile is two players. Who do you want to start with? We can start with Petrovic in net, and then we can also finish with or discuss after that Rodrigo Muniz. Who do you want to go with first? Who's getting you go a little bit?
I'll go to Rodrigo Muniz to start with. Okay. I like him a lot. I do like him a lot. I think obviously some of them mentioned fees of sort of 35 million. I think that's quite heavy, to be honest.
50.
50, yeah, 50. Yeah. No. We can get. It's not a fact that Rodrigo Muniz isn't good enough or anything like that. We can genuinely get a better player than Rodrigo Muniz for 50 million. I think Tiano Barry, for starters, from Villarreal, who Everton are looking at.
Yeah.
I think I've mentioned him before. I think probably the last one we did, actually, in terms of potential transfers. I really like him, and if his fee is anywhere like Rodrigo Muniz's, if we're talking within 5, 6, 7 million of Rodrigo Muniz's asking price, I'd go for Tiano Barry instead. I really do believe that. And plus, it stops Everton getting their first choice potentially. Whether we could beat Everton to a signing like that, who knows? But Rodrigo Muniz, let's just talk about him. I like what I've seen for Fulham. Of course, he's not had that extended run of games where he's been the main number 9. Certainly not this season with Raul Jimenez obviously emerging, but Raul Jimenez is a very experienced Premier League striker, so that doesn't worry me too much. Of course, Rodrigo Muniz is very different from being like a backup striker to being a striker who starts 38 games for a struggling team. That is very different. But in terms of what he can offer, that ability to stretch playing behind, that ability to hold the ball up, I think that all ticks all them boxes. And I think there's goals in Rodrigo Muniz. I think he can easily get double figures in this Leeds team, even if we are struggling for creativity at times, not because of the players we have on the pitch, just in terms of the opposition we play. I think Rodrigo Muniz has got that ability to sort of carry an attack in a similar way to Liam Delap. I don't think he's as good as Liam Delap, but he's that similar profile in terms of one that gets you up the pitch and isn't reliant on service. He can make goals out of nothing. I think as well, I might be wrong on this, I think he got Premier League Player of the Month quite recently as well.
Yeah, he did.
That happened sometime in the last 12 months or so. So he's certainly a player that can run on hot streaks. Whether he can be consistent for a 38-game season? I genuinely don't know. I'm not saying he can. I'm not saying he can't. We just haven't seen the evidence of that. That'd be the one slight concern. But I don't think it's enough of a concern to say he shouldn't be a top target for the striker position. And of course, the fee's the key one as well. I wouldn't pay crazy money. I think there's other options out there, but he certainly would be one who we'll look at in terms of a team trying to stay up, which is what we've got to base everything around. Here's a prototype centre forward for that.
Who are the other names then that you're looking at when it comes to striker profiles? Because that's the interesting one, isn't it, Oscar? That is a really interesting one when it comes to fans and what they're excited about. Rodrigo Muniz feels like the player who would very much fit a Thomas Frank system, of which obviously he's gone to Spurs right now, hasn't he? And he feels like he's just a Thomas Frank player, and it'd be interesting to see if Spurs do ignite their interest in him again. From a Leeds perspective, Beto's been banded around, Promise David. Obviously, where are we at, do you think, in terms of bringing someone in? And is there a name of which you will be looking at who's relatively achievable?
Well, one I really like, and I think I've mentioned it before, whether it's achievable or not, I think it's on the borderline. I think it really is. But Victor Boniface is someone I really like. Of course, the biggest thing of this is obviously what Eric Ten Hag's plan for him is at Leverkusen. If he's planning to be the number one striker ahead of Patrick Schick, then that's not happening. Let's make that clear. But I think in the last year or so, Boniface is very much being the backup to Patrick Schick. So in terms of game time, it's possible in that sense. Obviously, with the World Cup coming up as well, Boniface is under pressure from, well, he is very much the second striker for Nigeria, because obviously Victor Osimhen is by far their first choice. But Boniface needs regular game time. From his point of view, I'm talking about from a Boniface point of view, it's no good for him being the backup striker for Leverkusen for another season, because that won't get him any closer to the World Cup team. So, and that will be a factor. That will be a factor for a lot of players you have to look at as well. So Boniface, I think, covers a lot of bases in that sense in terms of profile. I mean, he's just a perfect profile for a team that's looking to stay in the Premier League, and it's probably a mid-table Premier League quality signing, and maybe borderline Europa League quality signing. So whether it's realistic or not, I'm sure the chat or the comments will say absolutely not, but possible. I do think it's genuinely possible if we go on the offensive in terms of the fact that you look at the Rafinha case study and things like that in terms of what Boniface could achieve if he has a good season at Leeds United, and Liam Delap at Ipswich is a similar kind of theory. But whether that's realistic or not, I don't know. I'd imagine he'd be by far the most expensive of the likes of Barry, Muniz, and options like that. But again, I'm happy enough with Muniz if that is the first choice. He's probably more in the sort of Timu Pukki kind of profile, but with a bit more to his game in terms of hold-up play and link-up play, which is good. But he still has the goal-scoring capabilities of Timu Pukki. And people might laugh at that, but Timu Pukki still scored double figures in both seasons under Daniel Farke, or 1.5 seasons under Daniel Farke at this level. So that profile can work, but it just needs a bit more link-up play alongside it as well. But yeah, here's the one that's clear to me. Beto, I'd actually do like, but I don't think he'd be my first choice. I think there's better options out there than Beto, and the sheer cost of Beto to get him from a rival, I think that makes that one very difficult. Awoniyi as well, I like from Forest. He's not getting any game time anytime soon. Whether that's possible or not, because he did have a big injury. Life-threatening injury, actually, it has to be said. That would obviously be very dependent, but he's certainly someone in Forest's first season at the Premier League who was absolutely critical in him staying up. If he wasn't there, Forest wouldn't have stayed up. It's as simple as that.
Well, I think for me, the interesting one is Boniface. And I didn't expect you to bring him up, to be honest with you, mate. I think under a
It's a very daring one, that one, by the way.
It is a very daring one. There's a raised eyebrow when you said that, but it is, like you say, when it comes to Rodrigo Muniz, he's one who is it replicates a lot of that, what Muniz would bring. The fee would be interesting. I know Leeds have been speaking about banding around about 30 million quid for a striker. I quite like how he's a drop deeper to link play. I think that's pretty obvious. I think he's got the other facet to his game as well, where he's kind of good in that pocket, that number 10 pocket, in terms of linking the attacker, the attack in the midfield. But I think the brilliant thing about him as well is he can stretch defenses, almost Matteo Joseph in that aspect, about how he's able to stretch defenses a little bit and offer those runs, and as well, Oscar, creating chances as well as finishing them. You look at his numbers, and he's able to do that alongside putting the ball in the back of the net. I think in a 4-2-3-1, Boniface up top, You're looking at Nonto, maybe one side, or Ramazani the other side. A nice little number 10 in there as well. Some nice little shields when it comes to obviously that double pivot. I really like it, and he's a really good focal point, isn't he? And I think genuinely he could play in a 4-2-3-1 and a 4-3-3, which is exactly what we're talking about when it comes to certain players being able to adapt to, multi systems, not just the one system.
Yeah, absolutely. I look at Boniface as like, say, the Rodrigo signing back in September 2020. If you'd have told me back in July 2020 when we got up that we'd sign Rodrigo Moreno from Valencia, I'd have told you we were absolutely mad. So that's what I'd say, just to point out. And I do think actually Boniface is a much better stylistic fit than the
Yeah.
Rodrigo is. So I think the way I look at it is Rodrigo at the time, as we all remember, was Spain's number 9. If we can sign Spain's number 9 in September 2020, for me, Victor Boniface, who isn't as established, well, actually is a better tactical fit. I don't see why that can't
But
be done.
he's a better I mean, we're not just comparing Rodrigo here, but in terms of, like you said, the caliber of signings, he's so much more valuable in transition heavy games as well, isn't
Yeah,
he, when it comes to
absolutely.
Boniface? So